Okay, we are recording. So good morning. This is Casey O'Brien, the Director and Principal Investigator of the National Cyberwatch Center. I want to welcome you again. This is the second in our 2014 webinar series. The topic today is on national curriculum and efforts underway, as well as challenges and goals for delivering updated curriculum. And I want to just point out before we get into today's topic that the next webinar series on March 28th, the last Friday in each month, is the day reserved for the National Cyberwatch Center webinar series. Each of the topics is at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're going to have Dr. Diana Burley, who is the National Cyberwatch Center Director of Research, and a panel of her esteemed colleagues talking about conducting classroom-based research. So look for invitation in your inbox following this topic, as well as a link to the recording from today, so you can sign up for future webinars. All right, so panelists. So first up will be Dr. Margaret Leary from Northern Virginia Community College. So Margaret, without further ado, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I will forward to the next slide.
Okay, thanks, Casey. I am the Director of National Curriculum on the National Cyberwatch Center. I've been associated with Cyberwatch now for about 7 or 8 years. Northern Virginia Community College is one of the lead institutions on the Cyberwatch effort. I'm obviously a professor of cybersecurity, and I also do a lot of consulting in cybersecurity for via government solutions, and that's about it for me.
So if you have a question, again, you can use the chat feature in WebEx. If you're dialing in and not using WebEx, then we will allow time at the end of each slide for folks to ask questions. You can also raise your hand within WebEx, and I can go ahead and unmute you. If you have any technical problems during the webinar, you can email me at cobrien, C-O-B-R-I-E-N, at cyberwatchcenter.org. We'll try to get any problems resolved. Okay, so the agenda, Margaret's gonna talk a little bit about the national curriculum efforts, including a task force that was formed by me going on about a year and a half ago now, and then some of the challenges and curriculum goals, which I'll speak to. So, Margaret?
Okay, thanks, Casey. Yes, so Cyberwatch's effort with managing or with identifying curriculum needs for community colleges, as Casey said, isn't necessarily a new one. We have been providing model curriculum to institutions for a number of years, including a model AAS degree program, a model AS degree program as well. But about a year and a half ago, we identified really the need for a task force of faculty from across the nation, and including also, so we weren't too narrow in scope, a task force of faculty from 2- and 4-year institutions as well. And so we started with some efforts in mapping mapping the NICE framework to our Cyberwatch curriculum about a year ago, and then we realized that this is something that we really needed to expand. And so we have established a task force. You see here on this slide the folks to which we owe all of this work to. They're in the process right now of gathering course objectives from institutions, both 2- and 4-year institutions, and then also supervising about 12 students to do the initial mapping, and then they're going to validate that. And if anybody has any questions, you might just want to, like Casey said, raise your hand or chat or interject something as we go along. I don't think we would have very many questions on this slide, so I'm going to ask Casey to go ahead and move to the next slide. Casey?
Yep, sorry about that. So I had my phone on mute there. Sorry about that. John Knight from Ivy Tech Community College. That's my fault. I corrected that there. Sorry about that, John. Okay.
Okay, and so the goal of the task force, one, as I mentioned, we're going to pick up where we left off when we started this other effort to update the CyberWatch curriculum model here. We've already begun this work. We looked at the courses that CyberWatch has identified and provided content for, and there are obviously a couple of courses within there that we're going to be making recommendations to update. Several courses actually need some considerable updating and replacing a couple of the courses within this model AAS degree. So we can expect that within this next 12 months or so here. But again, we received a supplemental award from NSF to do some work too that was of interest to them as well. And that is where we have established this collaborative curriculum grant here to actually look closer at this national cybersecurity workforce framework. And so I'm going to ask Casey to flip to that next slide so we can talk a little bit about what that work involves.
And before I do that, could you describe a little bit for folks who may not know what we mean by the CyberWatch model curriculum and what that looks like, and perhaps some courses or whatnot in that?
Right. Well, certainly. And CyberWatch defined a series of recommended courses for realizing that the mission of CyberWatch is really to support the ability of institutions to be able to develop cybersecurity programs. Many of these institutions don't have existing resources or faculty to help them plan what a program might look like. And so CyberWatch for our members has defined both an AAS, which is a terminal degree, and an AS, which is a transfer degree. We've defined what these model programs might look like. And within there, you'll see, the foundation courses, which are, A+, Network+, Cisco courses, and then you have the cybersecurity specific courses. That would be the Security Plus and some hardening classes. What I found very interesting with this is that I participated on an ACM study internationally over in Germany that at transferability issues between 2- and 4-year institutions. And what was very interesting about this is that when I realized during the course of this study that the schools that we had enumerated who had implemented the model curriculum actually performed better and were more successful in the collegiate cyber defense competition. And so it was really sort of a testament to making certain that these foundation classes and these other courses were included within a curriculum. But I think one statistic says that 60% of your existing technical skills become obsolete in 2 years, and that's certainly the case with curriculum that has to be maintained as well. And so we need to update a few of these courses just simply that, because they've moved from, certain versions of Windows Server as an example to more current ones. So, we'll continue to update this and that will continue to be made available to institutions that are looking to implement a cybersecurity program.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, next slide.
All right, so this current effort that we're working for the purpose of this grant that we have funded with our faculty and with our students here is actually multifold. We have the first objective is to build a taxonomy and really a lexicon for government agencies. Government agencies, of course, and industry and academia partnered on what was the NIST framework. It's now the NICE, the National Cybersecurity Workforce Framework. And I'm not certain if any of you have or how many of you have looked at this or not, I'm seeing a lot of interest by institutions that contact me directly to ask me, what CyberWatch is doing with this framework. So I do think that there's a lot of interest in it. I'm hoping that they're not confusing the cybersecurity workforce framework or the NIST framework with the new CAE requirements, or the CAE 2Y requirements, which are the knowledge units that DHS defines, because the framework is much more broad in its content. There are about what the framework serves to do is define all of the different specializations that you would find within cybersecurity. In fact, I refer a lot of my students up to this framework when they say, well, what can I do in cybersecurity? So I'll point them up to that framework, and I'll say, well, look, these are all the different things that you can do: forensics, or computer network defense, policy, all of these different areas. And so, of course, associated with these areas are very specific knowledge, skills, and abilities. And so what the effort of our role is to build this taxonomy or lexicon of what academia calls it on their course objectives and map that to a specific KSA in one of these cybersecurity specializations. I think it's very important to really understand what this framework will be used for. And I think that's sometimes a disconnect with institutions who may discount the importance of this framework. I would say that if you have any federal employment at all in your area, not to do that, because my understanding from speaking directly with CIO offices and with other government people in the know is that this framework is going to form the basis of all position descriptions for civilians as well, within Department of Defense and some sectors of Department of Defense as well as civilian agencies. And so they'll combine these different specializations to form different position descriptions. And so I think it's very important for institutions who service federal government, and I would also expect that in the absence of a standard for commercial businesses, this is also very easily adopted, as much of this work is, very easily adopted by, the commercial sector. So I think it's very important to look and see how your institution's curriculum is meeting some of these KSAs, especially as they combine into these position descriptions. I think there's a lot of opportunities there for institutions. And so, we have our first goal is to really interpret, if you would, how academia expresses a particular knowledge, skill, or ability from that, that's identified in the KFA. And so we have over 250 security courses and course objectives and statements of, learning outcomes and all, that we are mapping to these KFAs. It involves about 34 different institutions, both at undergrad, at a senior level, senior institution, as well as community colleges across 19 different states. And it continues to grow because I still get some stragglers in there, even though we've divvied up most of this work. We're still going to continue to expand as we can. And so outside of building this lexicon for government agencies so that they understand when somebody comes from a particular institution that, this is, or they see a particular course objective, that this is how it relates to a KSA, we're also going to be doing a gap analysis. And the gap analysis will be more to look at are there areas that, within this framework, are there areas of opportunity, areas that have not been addressed. And also we will develop a mapping tool where institutions who have not had an opportunity to participate and they want to, at a later date, can either submit the information and have it mapped, or we can allow, we're not allowed, but we'll have a database that they can use that will allow them to easily do this work. So any questions before we go to the next slide? No, then let's go ahead and we can always pick up questions at the end if you like. So let's hit the next slide, Casey.
and I wanted to add one thing before we go on to the next slide, which is I also think one of the benefits of the National Cybersecurity Workforce Framework, which folks mistakenly refer to as the NICE framework, one of the benefits that will come from that will be clearly defined academic pathways to these job roles. Meaning, if the job role is computer network defense analysis, there are requisite knowledge, skills, and abilities associated and being defined with that job role. And then part and parcel with this work that Margaret and others are doing will be then to identify, well, what would be the academic pathway to the computer network defense analysis job role? Do you need an associate of applied science, or is a bachelor of science required, and if so, a bachelor of science in a specific discipline? And I think that bodes well, especially for the community colleges. Before we go on, there was a question: when will job roles be available? That's the first question.
You know, I have been looking for that. I was told initially there'd be some information with regard to that in February. I have not seen it yet. And now in the framework that is up, framework information that is on this website, there is, some preliminary rules that are defined. For instance, there's a document in there that shows how these combine. For instance, the ISO, or Information System Security Officer, how those individual specializations would be combined. Because there's not just, an ISO does tasks that span multiple specializations. And so I would expect very quickly that this information would be coming out. And as Casey is showing you here, this is the interactive framework. And I believe the supporting materials of the framework, the interactive how-to and implementation guide, I think that is where some of that information actually is resident here.
And there's a second question. Is there a list of competencies that match the framework?
Well, by competencies, I'm not certain if I understand that completely. But by competencies, there are already knowledge, skills, and abilities. And so, obviously, wherever you see something that they want, demonstrated skill, although there aren't as many of them as one might imagine, those would certainly be the competencies that a student would have to demonstrate when they're going out looking for work, or that an institution should demonstrate within their program. My understanding, too, of course, is that the knowledge units that are present in the CAE and CAE2I criteria are pulled or relate directly to these KSAs within the framework.
Okay, and then the person that asked the question gave an example of competencies. So perform routing at what level, or competent at what level?
Yeah, and you know what?
Competencies at what level that match the framework?
No, there's a list of competencies, and you have to be able to demonstrate knowledge of routing principles. But this is actually, I think, one of the weaknesses within. I'm sorry, your engine is not valid, or the meeting is not set. So, but I think that's one of the weaknesses within this framework, is that it doesn't very plainly demonstrate the level, and that's one of the questions that our own faculty who are doing the mapping have raised, and that doesn't do a good job in identifying the level or the skill level required for the competency.
Good. Excellent. Thank you. All right. So next slide, Margaret.
All right, so at the end of this, we anticipate by April 30th, we will have all of these courses mapped. We will have a database prepared at that time. We have a team of folks working on that we will then import all this information into the database, and it will allow us to begin our analysis of this information and then put together a report. We expect also to be able to report on this at the free CS conference as well, up in association with the High Tech conference in July, and Casey can provide some more information on that as well. But task force will be getting together and looking at some of these initial findings, and we can give a small report at that time on it. And then also we'll do our major report at the NICE workshop in Gaithersburg in October for these findings. So, in looking at some of the possible questions that I felt that folks might have in this would be, what challenges have we encountered with this? Well, one of the biggest challenges that we encountered was in trying to get to the right people at the institutions to be able to request their course objectives. We have, of course, the information for folks that are associated with CyberWatch, their points of contact, and so that, made it easy. But we really didn't want it to be too top-heavy with just the CAE2Ys or the community colleges. So we also had requested some information. Of course, much of this is not, NSF can't disclose the points of contact. And so we've had a bit of a challenge. We've sent information out to senior institutions. I would like to see more institutions participate than what we have had, but we do have some good representation. The other problem that we've had is in narrowing the scope so we don't, in essence, boil the ocean. And the problem here, is, well, how do we define these cybersecurity courses? Because if you look at the NICE framework, if you look at the framework, I always get in trouble for calling it the NIST-NICE. It's obviously not the NIST-NICE framework any longer. NICE is the initiative, and NIST was the agency tasked with pulling all these partners together. But the other problem that we encounteed was, do you include, for instance, the Cisco CCNA courses? Do you include the Network Plus, A Plus courses that might be a part of that are certainly a part of the CyberWatch model curriculum? What we have done, CompTIA has generously shared their mappings with us for Security Plus, and we also have requested the same from EC Council for the Certified Ethical Hacker. We do have, of course, objectives that Cisco provided to us as well. And so we're going to certainly be able to incorporate some of the vendor certification, how those map to the framework with regard to what we have right now, which is the Security Plus and CCNA. But the other one is we precluded mapping the A Plus, Network Plus programs, largely because we're really hoping that vendors step up to this as well, which I expect that they would. I think that I had a thought and I forget now what that was. So the other question here, what value does this provide to institutions? I think one of the largest values that you're going to find from this process is that it's, we're providing this information directly to the institution. We're not going to be sharing information to other institutions about how your institution maps to the framework. We're going to be, of course, looking at these, larger pictures of how everybody maps to it, but we're not, going to be providing your specific information to someone else. But from your perspective, having this mapping will allow you then to look at your partnered senior institutions and be able to, even on a course-by-course basis, perhaps better articulate a course to a senior institution, or look to see where you might modify a course to be able to smooth articulation to that other institution. And it also will allow your program gaps to be identified, as we mentioned, so that if you wanted, as a senior institution even, to develop a program that would prepare somebody for federal service as an information system security officer, you would know exactly what those KSAs, where your program might be lacking, that you would want to include additional information into that. Why should you participate in the mapping process? Well, number one, it's free. And I will tell you from my experience, and I'm sure our task force faculty that we have on the call here will tell you that it's a very laborious process to map these courses. And so it's not something that you will want to do later, and I am certain if you have a cybersecurity program, you will want to do it later. So I would definitely take advantage of the fact that we are doing this free of charge under the grant at this moment. You can still participate if you send your course objectives. You can mail them or email them directly over to me, and I can get them shared to our faculty and student mappers here. And so that's really all I have on that. The next part to this, this will all be completed by August when we move into the next part of our collaborative curriculum grant, which is now to identify or develop the competencies-based assessments for some of this content. And for that, I'm going to type in my email address here. For that, I'm also going to turn it over to Casey, and I'll ask if there's any other questions before I do with this part that we're doing this year. Oh, thank you. All right.
Let me unmute everybody.
Teachers.
So let me. Okay, you continue. You hear me okay? Portia?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So some of the challenges and then goals. So when we're thinking about curriculum, and I talk with people both from industry, government, and academia, these are some of the issues. And also just as an educator in the classroom, dealing with this stuff on a daily basis, these are the issues I see really that perhaps the National Cyberwatch Center, working with the likes of the folks on this call and our partners, can help address or provide some potential solutions to. So the first one is, who is the authoritative source for content? When you think about an organization or an entity that works in cybersecurity and specifically is creating content, who is that, right? And what is it that they have that makes them the authoritative source? I would argue there really isn't one authoritative source for content. And perhaps there never will be. Perhaps there will be multiple sources, but it's certainly an interesting question and presents a challenge, especially from a faculty educator perspective, where folks are looking for a centralized repository of resources that, learning objects, for example, that they can use to support their classes, both face-to-face and online. So where would I go to get that? How do we motivate people to contribute? People are motivated by different things, motivated by money, prestige, fame, recognition. So how do we motivate people to actually contribute, for example, the content that they've developed to some kind of a central repository, for example? There are certainly articulation agreement challenges, specifically the Associate of Applied Science, the AAS degrees, which Margaret mentioned earlier. They are really a terminal degree. For those that aren't familiar with them, for the most part, if you're in a community college and you're teaching cybersecurity courses, and in fact, if you have a degree in cybersecurity, chances are it's an Associate of Applied Science. And chances are it's got a focus on network security / information assurance. There are a handful of schools that do concentrate on either, good old-fashioned computer forensics, or some moving towards network forensics or digital forensics. That would be the umbrella term under which network forensics would fall. But short of really concentrations in those areas, most of the community colleges are teaching the same content, and most of their degrees are the AAS flavor, which means more technical classes, less math, less science with a lab, less hard sciences with a lab. And given that the majority of four-year schools that have cybersecurity programs have them housed within computer science, the AAS cybersecurity degree programs and the credits in those programs being transferable to those computer science four-year degree programs is really not an option. And so, how do we deal with this? What are some ways in which we can address this? Perhaps incentive, motivate, and encourage four-year schools to create more IT focused cybersecurity degree programs. Perhaps in some states where there's a culture and the politics encourage two-year schools to create baccalaureate degrees. You're seeing this in Washington State. You're seeing a bit of it in Florida. And perhaps also look to, as Margaret mentioned, as we look to filling the gaps in the work she's doing with the task force, perhaps looking at some kind of a computer science with software assurance or secure coding or secure elements throughout a computer science program at the two-year level. That would be either an AA or an AS. That would make it easier for students coming out of those programs to transfer into those four-year schools that have computer science degree programs. So that remains a challenge. Not enough people creating content. I mean, there really, in my opinion, are a small number of people that are actually creating content. And Margaret mentioned that the National Cyberwatch Center got some supplemental funding from the National Science Foundation to fund the work that she's doing over 3 years. But also part of that supplemental is to support a pilot looking at perhaps some sort of a crowdsourced content creation model, and perhaps that's students and faculty or graduate students or graduate students working with their graduate school advisors. And the idea is, get more people to create the content. And part of that supplemental funding from the National Science Foundation includes stipends to pay faculty initially to motivate them sufficiently. And then with that, so not enough people creating content is the last question, which is how do we know content is any good? How do we know that, if we're able to answer that, if we're able to figure out how to motivate people sufficiently to contribute, say, to a central repository of learning objects that includes curriculum learning objects specifically, how do we know the content is any good? And perhaps the pilot, this crowdsourcing pilot, would have an element where the community could rate the content. So kind of a la Amazon or any really website reviews of products, for example, and then use a rating system of some sort. But I also see part and parcel with these curriculum challenges, too much duplication. I see a lot of duplication, a lot of people spending, those that are creating the content, really focusing their efforts on content that perhaps already exists. And so how do we deal with that? So there is there's a couple questions in the chat room. What are the opportunities for employment for students with AA or AS in cybersecurity? I think it depends on the focus of the AA or the AS degree program. I think really, quite frankly, the biggest challenge for entry-level students, so primarily, students coming out of the community college space that have no real work experience, for example, the real challenge is just lack of defined entry-level job roles, or even what people are calling the middle skills. And that is, I have a high school degree and perhaps less than a four-year degree, and I want to get into the workplace. So what are the middle skills jobs in cybersecurity? And they really haven't been articulated very well. I do know, though, if people have software development, software engineering, programming skills, those certainly are in high demand. and they tend not to be a focus of the tier space, and so perhaps that's an opportunity for us. And one thing that the National Cyberwatch Center is doing is we're going to be partnering with Monster to look at perhaps industry needs over the past 3 years in cybersecurity, and doing some data mining of job titles, of various cybersecurity-related job titles, and looking at the required knowledge and skills, and trying to make a sense of, okay, well, what are people really asking for, and perhaps along with that work, then start helping to define what those middle skill or entry level positions in cybersecurity would be. So let's see. Where are the good textbooks? Really good question. I think this is the Casey O'Brien personal opinion, is there are very few good textbooks specifically in the two-year space especially. So I personally have used, the only textbooks I ever used in any of my classes was the CHAMPA, C-I-A-M-P-I, Mark Champa Course Technology Security Plus textbook. I know others don't like that. Had to supplement the lab materials with my own. But I would, put that back out to the community. Where are the good textbooks? What are people using? If you're talking about Cisco curriculum, then there's official Cisco Academy textbooks. If you're talking about being part of a Microsoft Academy, or not even being part of the Academy, but just teaching Microsoft courses, Server 2008, for example, Active Directory, there is Microsoft official academic curriculum. And in my experience and opinion, both of those vendors have very good textbooks. And to some degree, a lot of the content will still continue to be developed by the vendors. Cisco and Microsoft will continue, Juniper, they'll still continue to develop curriculum. So let's see, labs. Let's see. I teach from the NIST CSRC pubs, so perhaps that's an option. There is this special series, the NIST 800 Special Series publications, that could supplement your courses. Labs will always be a concern as a comment. Jesse Barcelona has outstanding labs. So for those that have NetLab environments, you get lab content with those devices. And our colleagues at the Center for System Security and Information Assurance, CASIA, have used quite a bit of Department of Labor money to fund the development of very good labs that support Security Plus, ethical hacking, and/or some kind of a network penetration testing class. They're developing some lab materials that support the Linux Professional Institute LPI cert. Some network forensics are on the way. They're free. There's another comment here, JB Learning has some new books in security that are really good. Can you repeat the source for labs? The source for labs would be, there's lots of sources for labs. So the ones developed specifically by CASIA through DOL money, you can get those from CASIA. Let me pull up a website here. CASIA.org, and then if you go to their homepage, they believe it's under resources, and then specifically they've got CompTIA Security Plus version 2 lab overview. They've got some disaster recovery, the ethical hacking lab overview, new, dated August 5th. 2013. So I'll post the URL in the chat room for lab resources, and they are free. The ones from CASIA are free. They're very good for those that have used them. There is has a comment that says, I think Jesse's Security Plus labs go too far beyond what an entry-level class should cover. His labs are really close to ethical hacking, and I totally agree. I think there's an opportunity here for us to supplement the Cassia/Jesse Varsalone, who's faculty at the Community College of Baltimore County, former colleague of mine. Those are, I would argue, not really entry level, but they are a good supplement to entry level resources. And this is the kinds of challenges we have, which is, one person, Jesse, really creating, 120 lab exercises, but, needing more people to really fill in what would be considered entry level. There's another comment here. It says the CNSS 4011 labs from Cassia are more entry level. Okay, thanks for that. And they should be available. I don't see the CNSS link on the Cassia site, but I posted the URL in the chat room. So go ahead, Margaret.
I'm sorry. I think this gets back to, we first have to have this foundation of mapping, of really knowing how, our content, what our content addresses, for instance, in this new national framework. And at that point, I really like the idea of, rather than full courses, because we all as educators know that you can never find a textbook that addresses the requirements in your course. You're always having to augment it everywhere. But, if we have modular resources and labs that go along with those and competencies-based assessments like we're talking about, we can build our own in that case very easily that address specifically what we've mapped with, within this framework perhaps.
Good feedback, good questions. Let's see. Hi, Casey. Could you please post a list of recommended textbooks afterwards for the WebEx attendees? Sure. What I would encourage folks to do is send me what you think are good textbooks in your discipline, and we'll compile those and make those available to the attendees. And I'll put my email address in the chat room, but it's C.O'Brien, O-B-R-I-E-N, at cyberwatchcenter.org. I'd be happy to compile those. I see a comment that says you need an account on the Cassia website to see all the labs. That's true. So if you try to, for example, download the Security Plus labs, you'll get a kind of a high-level snapshot, but you will have to create an account on their site to actually download those labs. And they do that so they can keep track of who downloaded what and whatnot for their funders. And there's a login link right at the top under the resources page at cassia.org where you can actually create your own account. So thanks for that comment. We got a second for the Champa book for Security Plus. Can you post the lab link for Cassia? Yep, already did. It's if you go to the Cassia homepage at cssia.org and click on the resources link, you'll get the various lab resources they have available. So, and I posted that in that URL as well in the chat room. And I'll just mention here, since we're talking about compiling good textbooks and having a central location to point to these various learning objects. One of the new projects for the National Cyberwatch Center is, in fact, to create a national clearinghouse, and we're working with the University of Wisconsin on this project, and they're providing the servers and really the subject matter experts, the information scientists and librarians that specialize in creating controlled vocabularies and meta tagging various resources. And we'll be working with them to stand up this clearinghouse to point to these kinds of resources at Cassia, to point to other learning objects, videos, white papers, industry reports, lab exercises. We'd love to feature your programs in Clearinghouse. And so, look for more from the National Cyberwatch Center as we start building this out and trying to compile these various resources that are all over the place and in one place where people can go to. So let's see, we've got some other good comments here. Test outs, lab sims were redone last year and have been greatly improved. That's good to hear. Those were not so hot, in my opinion, early on. For CASIA Security Plus Lab, you must be a Microsoft Developer Network Academic Alliance member. Well, to actually get the labs themselves, they'll give them away, the lab exercises. So, but to be able to use those lab exercises, you need the accompanying virtual machines that were created to support those lab exercises. So you have a couple options. One is if you're running a NetLab environment, you have that lab content already, and there are guides available really through CASIA. You reach out to them to work with them to get your NetLab environment set up with the appropriate virtual machines to support not only the Security Plus, but if you want to do any of the ethical hacking labs, or in the future the network forensics labs. And so if you don't have a NetLab environment, then perhaps you can reach out to CASIA and CyberWatch to see about getting time on one of our members' NetLab systems. The third option is you can request the virtual machines that support the Security Plus and ethical hacking labs, for example, and run those in your own environment. For CASIA to be able to share the Windows virtual machines, you basically have to have what used to be called the Microsoft Developer Network Academic Alliance license through your college or university. Now it's a DreamSpark license, and that's also on the CASIA resources page. It's the third link from the bottom called the VM Image Sharing Agreement. And this is, in fact, the agreement that, says that, in fact, my college does have a DreamSpark license, and with that license, you provide some information, and CASIA is able to actually share those virtual machines and lab exercises for you to implement in your own environments. DreamSpark, I think I misspoke there, DreamSpark. So not MSDNAA, DreamSpark. So that's good comments, good feedback. Excellent. Anything else? Okay, let me go back then. We've got about 11 minutes. We're in real good shape. So some of the goals as we look to provide solutions to some of these curriculum challenges, these are the goals and the criteria with which we're thinking about both the creation and maintenance of the content. And so, one is that the content is relevant, it's current, it's consumable, meaning that it's available in all types of formats. So I can import it into a learning management system. I can run it in my virtual desktop infrastructure environment, my VDI. I can do the exercises on a tablet, on a laptop. It's OS independent, et cetera, et cetera. I can run it on any browser imaginable. The curriculum will be mapped to federal and industry standards. So Margaret's work is a really good example of this. Or perhaps the Center for Academic Excellence knowledge units, which you can think of those really as the common body of knowledge, or at least a start of a common body of knowledge for the field of cybersecurity. And so in designing curriculum, we need to have an eye towards for example, those two standards. And that students can get professional certifications if they want them. And I know there's lots of people are very religious and very passionate about the role of knowledge-based professional certifications, but in designing this content, we certainly will have an eye towards not only professional certifications, but also skills validation, a way to actually start providing mechanisms for faculty to in the content itself and the supporting learning objects. So assessments, for example, that start validating skills, or more informal educational opportunities to validate skills. The other thing too is that we are agile in both the creation and maintenance of the content. So, certainly the field is changing rapidly, and we need to be agile and be able to respond to the rapidity of the changes in the field, but also be agile in terms of maintenance. And so processes in place to, for example, make sure that the content that's being distributed through, say, a central repository like the CyberWatch Clearinghouse is relatively current and is of good quality. So that is some of the curriculum goals, and that is the official program. Use their phones. I'm going to get everybody that I can. Look for in your inboxes invites for future webinars and links to today's recording will be made available. So if you go to CyberWatch.org, along the right-hand side is Project Webinar Series. We'll be posting under the curriculum one here. We'll be posting a link to the CyberWatch YouTube. Or courses that have been or are being developed in the area like DevOps, system automation. Not that I'm aware of. Anybody know folks who are working on DevOps or system automation? So Corinne Sandy says she's teaching industrial control system security. That's a little different. That's definitely not DevOps, though. System automation. Russell, can you talk a little bit more about what you're looking for in system automation? Oh, scripting on servers. So there are folks that are teaching scripting classes. I know that Wilmington University's got a scripting class. They use Python. Let's see, another question here is, how about the DevCon people? Does CyberWatch have connections with them? DevCon? What do you mean by DevCon? Jan M., you can respond. I'll wait till that. There's another comment. Iowa State University has tracks with DevOps and sys automation. CC Community College of Baltimore County has a server-side scripting course. Somebody else said, I think Cassia developed a scripting class.
Yeah, the scripting requirements are actually required in the KUs for the CAEs and the CAE2Ys in the course. So I think, most of us at least should have modules within our courses that address that.
Yeah, so Margaret's referring to the new, the core knowledge unit requirements. So we can really consider those the common body of knowledge, really, at least the start of a common body of knowledge for the field of cybersecurity, and scripting / intro to programming is one of those. So Looks like Jan meant DEF CON, not DevCon. How about the DEF CON people? Does CyberWatch have connections with them? If you mean the DEF CON Hacker Conference, we do have connections with them through through some folks at CyberWatch West. Is there something specifically you're looking for? Linux Plus also has some scripting stuff, so a bunch of different resources there. If you're interested in getting a hold of some of the people from the Community College of Baltimore County that designed and are teaching the server-side scripting course, you can send me an email. I'm happy to do the electronic introductions. DEF CON is definitely up on the latest hacking. That's true. DEF CON is the premier hacker conference first weekend in August in Las Vegas. But there are also other conferences folks can get involved with. So the B-Sides conferences are very good. ShmooCon, usually the first week in February in Washington, D.C. It seems like there's a conference popping up every week. So Russell, you can, Russell. So Jeremy, if you don't mind, Jeremy Hoffman, if you want to send Russell Bush a private message, or if not interested, Russell, you can contact me. I've put my email address as well as Dr. Leary's is on the screen, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with folks. So there's Russell's email. I know there's a couple people here from Community College of Baltimore County. Maybe DEF CON has materials they can share. They have a lot. They record all of the speakers' presentations are recorded. And those are available. You can go to the DEF CON website. And that's defcon.org. They also have packet captures from their Capture the Flag that they make available. So folks that want to do some analysis of basically attack traffic. And I see that they have an announcement for their 20-second Capture the Flag exercise. So I want to thank everybody for your time and excellent questions and comments and suggestions. And feel free to reach out to myself or Margaret with any additional questions, suggestions, if you want to set up a time to talk about how to get involved with our national curriculum efforts, if you're interested in submitting content that you've got to the Clearinghouse, if you're interested in getting folks to help advise as to next steps up for your program, developing new programs. We're happy to help in any of those capacities and others. And I just want to again thank Dr. Leary, and also mention that the next webinar will be conducting classroom-based research on March 28th by Dr. Diana Burley, Director of Research for National CyberWatch Center. So everybody have a good weekend, be safe, and we'll see you on the next webinar series. Take care.
Bye.